Good afternoon. I would like to call this meeting of the Healthy and Safe Communities Committee to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are live streamed by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals and the media may also be audibly and/or visually recording this meeting. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during the committee meetings. Our first order of business today is selection or appointment of chair and vice chair. May I have a nomination for chair for 2019? Councillor Jackson. Pardon me. Come on.
That's fine. Oh, there we are. Wonderful. Thank you, Lorraine. Lorraine, it would be my honor and pleasure to move Ward 4 Councillor Sam Meroula as chair, with the vice chair being new Ward 7 Councillor Esther Paul, seconded by Ward 9 Councillor Brad Clark.
Thank you. Councillor Meroula, would you please make your way over to the dais and assume the...
Yes, I do. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, many thanks.
So, just thank you for your patience. So, Councillor Meroula will assume the role as chair for 2019, and Councillor Pauls will assume the role of vice chair for 2019.
And thank you. And before I start, I just want to thank everyone for that, and we'll move on. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are changes to the agenda. We have an added delegation request, 6.2 from Kevin Gauncey, Hamilton Collaborative Partnership Group, respecting a community hub proposal, multi-sport indoor facility development for a future meeting. We have a notice of motion, item 12.1, regarding the Tenant Defense Fund. And we have an added general information, item 13.1, which is the review of the outstanding business list for healthy and safe communities.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, moved by Councillor Pauls, seconded by Councillor Nan. All in favor? Carried. Now, there are declarations of interest. I need to declare an interest to prevent a conflict as a result of my wife and I being a landlord on the Tenant Defense Fund. And now moving on, approval of the minutes of previous meeting, moved by Whitehead, seconded by Clark. All in favor? Carried. With respect to communications, we have correspondence from the Assistant Deputy Minister at Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, can I just ask staff, on the surface it may make sense. Has there been any study, empirical data, evidence-based or otherwise that would suggest that the elimination of the program and the shift in policy would more than make up the differential in that direction?
Well, through the chair, quite frankly, no. We never got to implement the program, so we wouldn't have any way of knowing what will occur. We'll monitor it, so we had some targets that we were setting if this program would have gone forward, so we'll monitor to see if those do come forward with our ongoing evaluation of the creation of rental units.
So there's no economist study or provincial report that provides the contrast between the two programs and which one would net a great amount of affordable rental units?
So through the chair, we didn't do an analysis of that. If you want me to go and try and find some of the sources for the decision that was made, we could have our staff look into that, but no, we didn't do anything along those lines.
Could I suggest, Mr. Chair, now, not all the time, sometimes it's just completely politically and ideologically driven, but they do have deputy ministers and whole bureaucracies to provide input towards the direction, whether they support that input or not. I would think that they would have generated some information in that regard. So I would only ask direction-wise, no motion. If it's readily available, to get some background information from the appropriate ministry to understand the pros and cons and the benefits with the shift of policy, it would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. We have Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do we have any empirical evidence right now in terms of what developers are wanting to put forth rental housing applications, why they're not doing it? Have we had any consultations in that regard?
So through the chair, I know that planning continues to have ongoing conversations about our rental units. So again, I can speak with Jason and bring forward some of that. I mean, we have had a tremendous year in terms of building rental housing, so you did see that information come out from Jason. In terms of its ongoing ability to build, and particularly affordable or more affordable rental units, we've heard in the past, anecdotally, it's really about the cost structure, cost of construction, the ongoing cost of it. But I'll check with Jason and get back to you with some more information about some of the reasons why we're not seeing this happen, and some of the reasons potentially why we had a number of rental developers very interested in this program, notwithstanding the previous question about are there other ways to get at it. There may be ways to get at it, but there was interest in this type of program and quite a bit of discussion around this table about it when it came forward originally for us to apply to. So I'll work with Jason and bring some of that information back.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. So on the correspondence, may I have a motion? Moved by Whitehead, seconded by Jackson. All in favour? Carried. We have two delegations before us, both for future meetings of the committee, one being Lisa Rogers of Canusa, and the next being Kevin Gauci from the Hamilton Collaborative Partnership Group. May I have a motion accordingly? Moved by Jackson, seconded by Clark. All in favour? Carried. May I have a motion with respect to receiving the minutes of the Hamilton Veterans Committee? Moved by Whitehead, seconded by Clark. All in favour? Carried. May I have a motion to approve the recommendations in the report with respect to 7.2, if there aren't any questions? Moved by Clark, seconded by Nan. All in favour? Carried. We are now moving on to presentations. Item 9.1 is a presentation regarding the 2019 budget submission for the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm here today representing the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee with a team of diverse group of members, including service providers representing different organizations, members with lived experience and private sector perspective. I believe our committee enriches the table we bring our conversations to. I would like to begin with reviewing our mission and mandate. As a committee, we aim to communicate and work to address the needs of citizens within the community for whom barriers exist to accessing safe, suitable, and affordable housing, including the supports needed to enable citizens to obtain and retain their homes. We also align our work in support of the Hamilton's 10-year Housing and Homelessness Action Plan by providing information, advice, and recommendations regarding the action plan's successful and meaningful implementation. And we are mandated by City Council and report to City Council through the Healthy and Safe Communities Committee. So 2018 started with the committee diving into a project being proposed by Good Shepherd and the SPRC, supported by Envisage Architects. This innovative project intends to create tiny houses in Hamilton and offer opportunities for single parents to build a community. There is an opportunity to create a shared space that includes meal sharing, childcare support, and opportunities for gainful employment. The committee was presented with examples of where this type of development has succeeded in the past, including in Winnipeg, Nashville, Tennessee, and Denmark. This project is being proposed as an opportunity for 26 units of pocket housing intended for OW and ODSP recipients. The committee was able to provide feedback on the project, ask questions about supports and eligibility, and overall voted in support of this project. The point-in-time connection plan was presented to the committee, emphasizing the value of connecting with and serving the individuals who are experiencing homelessness, staying in shelters, or experiencing hidden homelessness. The dates for the event and results expected were discussed, while the initiative was also looking for volunteers. Members of our committee had the opportunity to volunteer and participate in supporting the two-day event. A presentation about the Coordinated Access Social Housing Waitlist was offered by the City of Hamilton's Housing Services Division, showing the accountability that can be attained through a centralized waitlist. The benefits of this approach stressed that applicants and community agencies had one central point of contact to support participants in obtaining and maintaining their housing. Additionally, a centralized waitlist will provide data to help inform system planning. Our committee members had the opportunity to inquire about the participants accessing the program, how they would be benefiting in the transition to the new program, while learning about how participants could benefit from the program overall. Some examples included eligibility criteria with established priority areas, educating participants about housing options, and offering referrals and supports for participants to establish or maintain stability in their housing. And one of our very own members presented on an initiative his team of 8 peer support members would like to see called Rising Star. This team advocates for cooperative housing with a focus on peer mentorship for individuals experiencing mental health concerns or who have lived experience with mental health concerns. The Rising Star team understood the importance of offering housing first while offering peer-driven support once housed as well as employment skills training. Rising Stars' next steps include incorporation while continuing to collaborate with Kiwanis Homes and the John Howard Society to support people exiting an institutional setting. Excuse me. Our Housing and Homelessness Committee had the opportunity to come together and provide consultation on the positive changes seen within the past 5 years since the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan has been implemented, express challenges or barriers while also sharing input on where the focus should be in the next 5 years of the plan, considering supply and supports. Our committee also consulted on the theme of energy efficiency and affordable housing and participated in the planning of the National Housing Day event, with committee representation on the organizing committee as well. The committee supported the community financially in accessing the National Housing Day event by providing bus ticket reimbursement for guests using transit on the day of the event. And in regards to our 2019 plans, our committee will continue to provide feedback for the action plan review, have working groups focusing on outcome areas from the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan, and continue to be involved in the planning and logistical support of the National Housing Day event. On behalf of our committee, I would like to thank you for the opportunity our team has in coming together to learn and work together. Thank our staff liaison for his support, and thank you for your time today.
Many thanks. We do have a question from Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask how often in a year does the committee meet?
6 to 8 times a year.
6 to 8 times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. There are no further questions, so many thanks for your presentation. Great work.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to receive the presentation moved by Nan, seconded by Clark. All in favor? Carried. On discussion items, we have 10.1, which is the budget submission, senior advisory. Sorry. Yes.
There is the
We did a
report that
presentation. I'm
accompanies the
sorry.
presentation.
May I have a motion to approve the report as well? Moved by Pauls, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Oh, sorry. Councillor
Just
Clark.
have one quick question to staff.
Yep.
I'm trying to understand, they're requesting $1,000 a year for 6 to 8 meetings, and then the next committee's requesting, I think it was $2,500 a year for monthly meetings. How do we establish how much money we pay for monthly meetings and why the difference between the two committees?
Paul?
Through the chair, generally it's historical. Some committees do have added expenses. It may be around transportation and travel, which in this case of this committee isn't as applicable. It's mainly agency providers and staff. It's primarily historical is the best answer I can provide, and there are reasons for that variability buried within the various budgets in terms of what they're using those monies on. This committee actually uses very little of the resources on a regular basis. They're one of the lower amounts that we've seen. But some of the higher variability costs are around things like covering transportation costs and some of those things for committee members.
So if the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee wanted to do some type of research report and they needed additional money, they can come to us and request that money? Separate from what they're getting in their budget is
So through the chair, sometimes I do know committees, when they know there's work happening, have put those costs in, but if those things emerge, that's generally done in conjunction with coming through you for a request, or staff would come jointly with that. In the case of this committee, there is a ton of work that does happen with the staff. To be honest, I think in future years I'll actually ask our staff liaison to work with the committee to see whether there really even needs to be a budget supported, whereas this might just be supported through our normal operating costs. But it is a formal committee of you, not of us, and so they do put in the budget request. But most of the work is done in conjunction with staff, including, of course, the 10-year Housing and Homelessness Action Plan.
okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We're moving on to 10.1, and it's budget submission, Seniors Advisory Committee. Any questions? Hearing from Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And just dovetailing on Councillor Clark's question on the previous one, believe me, if there's any group of people who are very frugal with their taxpayer money, it's seniors. And I've learned that very much over the years serving with them. If you've noticed, they've asked for an additional $1,000, and the additional $1,000 from last year's maintenance request of $1,500. The popularity of the Day of Older Persons, the Seniors Awards, is growing, hence additional costs to expand the amount of participants across our city and visitors to our city for these engagements, especially in the month of June, which is Seniors Month. So that's why the additional request is here, and I'm happy to move it at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Any further questions? Seeing none. Moved by Jackson, seconded by Pauls. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to the budget submission of the City of Hamilton Veterans Committee. It's before you. Are there any questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the report? Moved by Nan, seconded by Clark. All in favor? Carried. On motions, we have a mover and a seconder for the following. Interview Subcommittee. To the Healthy and Safe Communities Committee. So that's...
My apologies, Chair. 10.3 does not show up on your procedures.
Okay.
And 10.3 is the Rapid Rehousing Program Hotel Housing Allowances Report, HSC 18050.
Okay, and that's before you. Are there any questions? We do, from Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So just through you to Vicki Woodcox, Acting Director, or our General Manager, Paul Johnson. So is this tied in and part and parcel of the presentation we heard from, I think it was Julia Verbitsky, that we heard from Julia? Maybe a comment from staff. Is this part and parcel of the homelessness strategy and the update she gave us, Mr. Chairman, through you?
Vicki?
Through the chair, yes, it is. This is a pilot, but it's very consistent with our priorities in the Housing and Homelessness Plan to support people to be housed. And because we're seeing increased hotel use, which is not the ideal solution for these families, we are piloting a project that's shown some success already called Rapid Rehousing, where we work with the individuals as soon as they're referred to hotels and then work to place them in the private sector landlords and assist with paying a part of their rent. So we've seen some success in that. So we're going to follow this carefully for the next 6 months, which will lead us to further discussions on what's the appropriate way to address the needs of the families and try wherever possible to avert the hotel costs.
Thanks, Vicki. I really appreciate that. Just a subsequent, Mr. Chairman, to Vicki. Vicki, if you recall, the YW representatives in the last few budget years had come in, I think looking for some form of, was it a housing strategy or some sustainable housing for women? And is this partly, again, addressing that issue, or that would be a separate one? I think you may recall, my memory might be off a bit in terms of CEO Denise Christofferson and others coming in past budget years, and Brother Richard as well from the Good Shepherd. Mr. Chairman, through you, please.
Vicki?
Through the chair. The issues that the Y brought forward several months ago were tied a little bit more specifically to the 65 women they provide direct support to at the Y, and we have provided additional funding to the Y over the past 2 years. Having said that, they're part of the larger continuum of agencies that support women in the women's sector related to homelessness. And so, of course, this would be a voice, and I know they would be very supportive, as are all of the various agencies that are represented. We actually have Catherine here from the Good Shepherd, who leads the rapid rehousing and is doing a phenomenal job, and absolutely this is aligned in the direction where we want to go.
Terrific, Vicki. That raises my comfort level, and I'm very pleased to support this at the appropriate time. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. We have Councillor Nan.
Chair, thank you so much. And I just less a question and more of a supportive comment about the fact that we are investing $358,000 to in turn impact 120 families towards a pathway towards stable housing. So I'm excited to see this kind of program coming forward from our city, and just want to thank staff for the work on this along with our partners.
Thank you, Councillor Nan. So it's moved by Clark, seconded by Jackson. 10.3, all in favor? Carried. Moving on now, I need a mover and a seconder with respect to the interview subcommittee for the Healthy and Safe Communities Committee. Moved by Whitehead, seconded by Clark. Now, I need 5 names. Okay, so we have Councillor Nan, Jackson. 3's fine? And Whitehead? No? Okay, I'll do it. Councillor Nan, Jackson, and myself. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Notice of motion, added item 12.1. Now I need to step away. This is the item I declared an interest, and I'll pass the chair over to Councillor Pauls. So if you want to press the button. Okay, and now the floor is yours, Councillor.
So, Councillor Nan, I understand you wish to introduce a notice of motion.
So the motion reads, therefore be it resolved that a $50,000 fund be allocated to establish a tenant defense fund in the City of Hamilton to assist with the above the guidelines increase applications at the Landlord and Tenant Board, that Housing Service staff report back to the Healthy and Safe Communities Committee with the terms of reference that addresses the intake and granting process, and that the Tenant Defense Fund be funded from the existing Housing Services year-end positive variance.
Do you, oh, the mic?
Just a point of order, Madam Chair, just for everybody. I don't think, I'll just speak nice and loud. Point of order, Madam Chair. I believe we did not waive the rules to allow the motion to be introduced.
So,
my apologies, but just for the record. Thank you.
So, do you wish to waive the rules? Okay. All in favor?
Carried.
Any opposed? Thank you. Back to the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So as we all clearly understand around this table and around the entire council table, that the burden on tenants and the increased rate of housing creates a cost prohibition for tenants to take their defense to Landlord-Tenant Board. So it's from that perspective and the fact that there's great best practices coming out of the other municipalities who've established tenant defense funds going back to 2000, that we know that our tenants are eager for this kind of support coming from the city, and we are in the means to establish so I move that we create this fund.
It's all in favor? No. Oh, we have a speaker, Terry at Whitehead, Councillor.
I don't have a scope of how and the application of this tenant defense fund is, and we did have a number of small-time landlords that indicate that the landlord-tenant board is underfunded in regards to timely decisions and timely processes. So, first question, are we going to see a scope of the application of this fund, what it could be used for?
So through the chair, this motion, as I read it, is for us to come back and bring you all of that information. So today, you are not approving how we would administer it. You're approving that we would go away, bring those that implementation plan back to you, and that, assuming those are acceptable to this committee and to council, there would also be, though, funding set aside in order to make this happen. So we have a number of things we need to do. Toronto has a very good outline, which I know that originally staff had used when this idea came forward, but quite frankly, we have not got to the stage where I could give you today, this is what we expect it to cover in the scope. If you have suggestions for us to look at, happy to do that, but we will be bringing those back to you for your approval before this fund is implemented and anybody can receive resources.
It's my understanding Toronto is a different beast in regards to its life experience with tenants and condos, and the machinations are taking place in Toronto in the context of demand. I'm not sure if we arrive at the same level in regards to the metrics that you would measure for these issues. So in that report, will we be able to get that understanding and the Hamilton experience in respect to the amount of increases that are being requested? I imagine that this fund is only for increases. It's not for damaged property or improper property standards issues within the apartment and those kinds of things. So help me understand what's contemplated.
So through the chair, the motion is quite specific into the above guidelines increases. So this is the normal, some of the other normal interactions that tenants have with landlords is not my reading of the motion as it is here. And so this would be fairly tightly constructed in terms of what the support would be there for. So that's the way I read this motion. Quite frankly, we've done no work on this yet. This has only emerged as an idea very recently. So if we're not providing with a ton of assurances here, it's because we're going to go away and do the work and bring it back. But this is about a very specific set of things that tenants are having difficulty, of course, mounting the right kinds of supports around. I know in Toronto it's a graduated system where it can be a small loan of, or a small grant of $1,000, a $5,000 one if more experts need to be brought in, that kind of thing. So we'll have to look at a variety of things around this fund before we bring you back our final recommendations. And we'll also do a better scan not only of our community but of other municipalities and how they've implemented this.
So do we have the data in regards to, on an annualized basis, what and how many tenants are impacted by these applications?
So through the chair, right now we have, of course, a number of tenants in the East End that are affected by this, but in terms of looking at it in any historical context or what the volume might be, no, that would be part of our work now.
Okay, so we're moving this ahead of knowing what the actual data is in the context of the Hamilton experience?
Well, through the chair, we know that this is an experience that tenants are facing. So in terms of is this a solution without a problem, I wouldn't suggest it's that. We know there are issues and challenges, and tenants have brought those forward. The total scope of that and how often we maybe have been asked in the past for that kind of support, I don't have that information for you at the moment, but we would bring this forward. But in terms of is this an issue that we felt as staff is worthy of some exploration, absolutely.
I think my fear, Mr. Chair, is that without the data, this is putting the cart before the horse, and it doesn't mean it's not needed. But 50,000 might be a pittance based on what the actual experience is in Hamilton. You can make the argument you need to start somewhere. I like to start where we're meeting the needs in the community, and without empirical data that suggests the magnitude of the problem within our community, how do you associate a cost that is representative of the challenges and issues in our community? So help me understand how we move ahead without even having the data.
So through the chair, you're moving ahead for us to bring back both data and an outline. At that stage, you could decide not to proceed with this, and that would be fine. I think if I understand the intent of the motion. It is also, though, to set up that if you are okay with why we're doing it and how we're doing it, that A, you've identified money, which can sometimes be the next hurdle, and B, you've identified a source for that money that would not involve an additional hit to the tax base in this year or next. So I think those are just to allow you to move forward if you feel that way, but we will have to bring forward a bunch of information. I understand that we don't have it for you today, nor does the motion include that. We're going to do that work and bring it back to you, and then you will have the decision to make as to whether to move forward or not.
So if the problem is acute, more acute than we expect based on the data, limiting it to $50,000 might not do it justice. So we're naming a number now. Is it premature to name that number now?
Through the chair, our intent is to move quickly on this, and so in terms of the positive variances, the year-end stuff doesn't come forward until about April, May time usually, so you would have a little bit of time in the new year if you needed to adjust that number. Our projections are pretty locked in for 2018, and this is a product that's occurred in a number of years, so we're bringing forward some ideas as to how to spend that surplus ourselves. But I think you can be assured that if you had to go up a little bit, it wouldn't be an issue, and we're going to bring this back to you in a matter of a few months. We're not going to take a year or so to do this work.
Okay. I appreciate the explanation. Like I said, I like to have data before we move and associate numbers to anything, and we're going to get the data. Nothing's locked in stone, and if we need to adjust the numbers, this would go to the budget process then in the context of final deliberation on the actual number, or are we just going to approve the dollars coming from surplus now?
So through the chair, I think what you're saying here, I think at the moment it comes forward as a recommendation report, we would recommend the money. It would be an in-year piece, but we would be suggesting to you at that time that this be funded out of the surplus that comes forward. So in terms of adjusting your 2019 budget, that wouldn't be required. You'd be taking this from the surplus, which you deal with after the budget is passed, usually in April or May.
Okay. And so I certainly appreciate the principle. I just wasn't sure if limiting the dollar amount without the data is reflective of the issue in the Hamilton without having that information. So I wanted to highlight that. And the second piece, which is not contained in here, but we certainly heard from tenants and landlords, is that, and I don't know if it's a separate motion I need to be putting forward or notice of motion, work with staff, but it sounds to me like there's a significant capacity issue in regards to landlord-tenant, adjudicators and so forth to expedite hearings and decisions on the number of complaints coming out of our community. So I don't know if we have any data on that, but we've heard it. Is there a word verified? And is that a motion that I could work with staff to, as a council, encourage the province to add additional staff to meet the needs in this community?
Through the chair, I don't have that information or data with me, and I would suggest, I'm not wanting to do the clerk's work, but I would suggest it is separate. This is clearly about tenants, and I think what you're talking about is a separate issue that we would want to deal with. We're happy to take direction to go and explore that, but it wouldn't happen naturally through this process. So I just want to be clear about what we'll do with this motion as opposed to what you're talking about.
And the reason I'm mentioning it in the context of this motion is because if timeliness is one of the big issues, it's impacting both landlords and tenants in the respect to rendering appropriate decisions in a timely fashion. So I think there is a tie-in, direct or indirect. So, Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time, I'll serve notice of motion, work with staff to see what that motion would look like, and bring it forward at a future date. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Whitehead, we have Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So just a couple of quick questions. In terms of the report back to the committee, can I suggest perhaps a friendly amendment that we include a background in terms of how the LTB actually works, the Landlord-Tenant Board process works, what services they may or may not offer to tenants who are experiencing a hearing on AGI. And similar to Councillor Whitehead, we should be able to get from the LTB the number of AGIs that occurred in 2018 and 2017. It'd be nice to see a trend as opposed to just punting. I'd also like to see included, Madam Chair, that in item B, where we're talking about the terms of reference, I'd like the terms of reference to have some form of an income base. Because there are people who may be paying $1,500 a month for rent, and then they're in a really nice building and they get an AGI and they want to object. Well, I don't think they should be funded the same as a tenant who's barely making their bills meet and they're paying $700 a month. So there should be some time of income test. I'm not sure what it would be, but it would be something that I think we could look at. And finally, an education component. I don't think, from my experience, the LTB does an efficient job of educating tenants about the process. And perhaps we can help tenants in that regard so that they actually understand what and how the AGI process works. And beyond that, Madam Chair, I think this is an excellent motion. I think it's something that is needed in the community. I know other municipalities are already doing it. We're not prejudging the outcome. We're getting a report back. The numbers may change. I don't know. But it's important that we get that information and then we see what we can do to assist in that regard. So I'm fully supportive of this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. May I have a seconder to the Councillor Nan's motion? Thank you, Councillor Jackson. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. I'm going to get
Great job, Councillor.
started.
Now we're moving on to general information and other business. Item 13.1 is a review of the outstanding business list. Are there any questions for staff that's before you? We have Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Not necessarily off the outstanding business list, but I had a recent chat after the inauguration night with General Manager Paul Johnson, and I guess some news reports, in spite of my long-standing work with seniors, one of the news reports caught me off guard to some degree and was very disturbing, and that was with evidence that a growing number of seniors are unfortunately at a stage in their lives using food banks. And I just wondered if the General Manager had any possible comment and or further insight he could give us into whatever he knows through his network, and or secondly, with this committee support, if he could maybe bring back a report in January to outline exactly through the tremendous food bank agencies we have in our community that we're lucky to have across the spectrum, but exactly what are they seeing, our food strategy that this past term of council implemented that I thought was wonderful, community food centers that we have up in Councillor Whitehead's former area that he was a leader of. And I'm just, in light of everything that we're doing here through the corporation and through seniors and seniors issues being such a high priority, that one particular area and that one report, again, based on evidence and data, somewhat disturbed me greatly and somewhat caught me off guard. So through you, Mr. Chairman, to the General Manager for a comment, and if he could maybe be willing to, in January, with this committee support, bring an information report back to us in terms of what we could further do.
So through the chair, certainly it is a worrying trend because in Canada we have had good success in reducing poverty and having a very low poverty rate relative to adults and to younger members of our communities in terms of poverty. In fact, we're world leading in that. So it is worrying. I need to bring back the Hamilton specific numbers. So what you saw was an Ontario Association of Food Banks report. That's a global number. So I do want to spend a bit of time and make sure I get the numbers from Hamilton. I have no doubt there's an increase. I just want to be able to provide data that shows the increase specifically for our community. The second piece is that I do know that one of the underlying factors is that the cost of living increases to many of the income security programs for older adults, mainly CPP and OAS and GIS, are being outpaced by the cost of goods. And so you will have, remember, we all seen reports about what the average cost of food is projected to increase by, and I can guarantee you that the Canada Pension Plan will not be going up by that percentage this year. I can guarantee very little around this room, but that I can guarantee. So there is an issue where some of the expenses for families and for seniors is outstripping the income, whether that's a pension or other types of forms of income, government transfer. And so I think that plays into it, Councillor. But those are generic comments from just anecdotal and experience. What I will do for January is come back with a bit more, and we'll also encourage perhaps that someone from our food serving organizations actually come and provide you some good information from the field, because I think it's better for you to hear from people who actually deliver this service on a daily basis. But did want to give you a bit of a sense as to what we see some of the factors being, and then bring some more specific data back in January.
Paul, thank you for that tremendous insight, and it's very alarming, and obviously we'll do whatever consultation you need to do with Seniors Advisory Committee as well. That will be part and parcel of your report in January. And like you said, on the positive side, we are making some dents into the poverty rates with Hamilton, our city, Mr. Chairman, being a leader for the last, 10, 12 years, setting up the Roundtable on Poverty with community stakeholders, leaders, including members of council and staff. But it disturbed me greatly when I heard that, and I'm satisfied that there'll be a comprehensive report coming back, and possibly with some recommendations as well, either from community stakeholders who are in the business of providing these services for families and seniors, and a growing demographic, which the seniors are across our city and will continue to increase, as well as from within our own professional staff. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me that.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. We have Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, and again, this is just for discussion. I don't remember the last time we had an update, but the province of Ontario was requested by Toronto and a number of other municipalities across this country for additional dollars, especially the ones that are getting impacted financially dealing with the refugee issues in the country. I don't know if Hamilton made that. I think Hamilton made that request. Can you confirm whether we did or not?
So through the chair, we did correspond with the province about the pressure that it's placing more specifically in our shelter system, but that does impact some of our food services as well. They have asked us to compile the cost estimates for that through the year, and so Vicki and her team have been doing that. And once this year is completed, we'll be asking for your support in forwarding that on to the province, and they've assured us actually through a letter from the province to the mayor that they will take that up with Ottawa once we can provide them the hard numbers. But yes, there has been an impact in our services for asylum seekers in particular, and we do want to capture that data so that we can seek some relief. So we haven't received any direct resources into our system to cover off some of these increasing costs yet, but we are compiling that for the year.
I appreciate that. The reason I raise it is I had 10 refugees in the last 6 months applying, were actually upset that they were so far down on the housing wait list. And I've had others that were long time tax-paying Canadians that end up with disabilities were also on that same list. And I was concerned that the province hasn't stepped up to ensure that the impact, and I want to make it clear, I'm a huge supporter of the refugee program, and I think we need to do our part, but I want to ensure that it's not coming on the backs of property taxpayers. It indeed is being funded by the federal government. Currently, their funding only goes 2 years. So we're 2 years post now with a fairly upkick in the refugee groups coming into the city of Hamilton. The 2-year funding is now exhausted, and I can certainly see it all through the Fessenden neighborhood, what has transpired. So I need to get a better understanding of, in review, where we're at, where we're going, and what are the challenges. So I hope that I see something, an update post the 2-year funding from the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. So we seem to rely on anecdotes a lot, but have we ever actually done some type of seniors' quality of life survey, so that we actually talk to the seniors, find out what some of the challenges that they're having. Can they pay the bills? How are they getting their food, et cetera, et cetera. I could think of at least a dozen questions that would be appropriate, and then we'd be hearing it from the seniors as opposed to agencies that may be providing services or not. And I think it would have more meaning to senior levels of government if we had a survey that actually backed up our concerns.
So through the chair, good question. I know some of that was raised when we developed our age-friendly plan for the city, but that's a couple of years in the past. What I was suggesting is the agencies could provide us with the data about their demographics that they're seeing. So it would just be one piece of the puzzle there. But that's a very good question, and one that we can take back to both the Seniors Advisory Committee as to how they might help us with that, but also to the Council on Aging and the age-friendly city movement, because if this is becoming, and we are hearing, so I spoke at the annual meeting of the age-friendly group, as I have been for the last few years, and we are hearing that poverty-related issues are rising in terms of what those issues are. And that's been the first time in a while that it's starting to move up the board, and that's worrying. But in terms of, you're right, it's now at the anecdotal stage. It's now at what we're hearing stage. So I think that's a great piece of advice. As you, for the newer councillors here, we do have a staff person from the city directly attached to the age-friendly work. So I will talk to Lisa Maychek and have her engage those committees to see whether they can help us in bringing forward a better picture of it from the older adult population. So thanks for that suggestion.
No, thank you, because it's been my experience when we start to hear it anecdotally that at that point it's an issue now, because normally seniors don't really talk about those issues. They're proud. They don't want to talk about it. And so I think the only way we'd actually get that information is to do some type of survey. So I'll leave it with them to come back from that, Mr. Chairman. We can follow up in the new year. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We have Councillor Pauls.
Yes, through the chair, I would like to know, what is the average wait list for the social housing? Is there an average wait list that people go on, and how does it work?
So through the chair, the wait list that we often talk about is actually a series of wait lists. And so I think in the new year you'll see us providing some much stronger information about what the wait list entails, because in some cases the wait list is actually people waiting for transfers within social housing. And then for others it's a wait list obviously for when time comes up for them to access affordable housing. So for some, the wait is very quick because there are priority populations that are moved on and off the list very quickly, and I'll turn it to Vicki in just a second to take you through what some of that might look like. But for others, it is a very lengthy process, and we're talking in terms of years. So I'm sure there's an average that we can give you. I'm not so sure that's the best thing to do, because that averages it across the entire wait list, of which I just said some of them move off very, very quickly. But maybe Vicki can add just a couple more comments about the kind of average time people are looking at in certain categories.
Thank you, through the chair, to the councillor. I think, as Paul has said, there is quite a variation, because we have some that are in high-risk category, like women who are fleeing from family violence, for example, and youth that are at risk will get prioritized in place fairly quickly. In terms of the other thing, just to clarify, that there are about upwards to 15% at least of the folks that are on that wait list that are in subsidized housing, but they're waiting to get into social housing. The range then can be anywhere from approximately 2 years upwards to 6 or 7 years. The longer time period is often related to spots that they really want to be in, like it might be a special building that they would like, so they haven't put forward as many options, and they're prepared to wait till they get something that they want. It might be in a particular geographic area, for example. one of the things that we're doing is we brought the wait list in-house. It was managed through a third-party company. So we are now very actively involved with all the existing applicants. We're updating all of their information. And at the same time, we're starting to talk to them about options and trying to maybe broaden their options to see if we can provide more opportunity. So in some cases, we are starting to talk to individuals about maybe we could look at a housing allowance program, for example, where we could work with you with a private landlord and help support the rent. So there's a lot of we're taking a really deep dive into the wait list to understand who's on it and what their priorities are, and hope that over time that we'll see some progress in this area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pauls. We have Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. On page 6 of the outstanding list under category UU, Hamilton Youth Engagement Collaboration. So at the other end of life's spectrum, of the life cycle with the young people, Mr. Chairman, you were a champion about 10 years ago helping to get the Hamilton Youth Advisory Committee started. And long story short, for this new committee, that typical traditional structure wasn't necessarily the best structure for the millennials, as many young people and that I'm engaged with, including through my election campaign, are teaching me more and more. And they want more of the virtual town halls. They want more digital engagement and different opportunities to be involved in community. So I'm really pleased. I've recently met with Director Grace Mader and Manager Al Fletcher, and I'm really pleased that there's going to be some exciting new youth initiatives coming back in the first quarter of next year, and hopefully will lead to more youth engagement. I will say as a closing note, though, to the old Hamilton Youth Advisory Committee that, Mr. Chairman, yourself and myself set up, I'm very proud of the fact that a product of that, Cam Galindo, has gone on to elected office successfully in wards 9 and 10 as a public school trustee. But obviously, I'm open to much newer ideas that will hopefully get young people, both primarily from the 14 to 24 age bracket, more involved in their local government. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. May I have a motion to approve the changes in the outstanding business list? Moved by Clark, seconded by Pauls. All in favor? Carried. We now have a private and confidential section, and before we go forward to the in-camera item, we do have the minutes that needed to be approved of the closed session from 2018, or September 2018. Moved by Clark, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Now, 14.2, which is the Ontario Works Program Review. I do need to read. May I please have a motion to move into closed session respecting item 14.2 pursuant to section 8.1, subsections B. Madam Clerk.
Staff, say something?
I just wanted to catch you before you launched into that. I just want to say congratulations to our Recreation Division, to all of the councillors who are here. Today we're going to have the official grand opening of the Bernie Morelli Centre. And I just wanted to, before we went into closed session, publicly thank our Recreation Division for all their great work on it. But this is a shared piece of work beginning in 2011 with a lot of folks. So I just didn't want to miss the opportunity. I'm so sorry I cut you off halfway through, because probably procedurally you're going to have to do it all over again.
Oh, good.
But I didn't want to lose the opportunity to thank Chris and many others for this great celebration we're going to have.
They've been champions, but let's not forget it was Bernie's idea. All right, thanks. Now, may I please have a motion to move into closed session respecting item 14.2 pursuant to section 8.1, subsections B and D of the city's procedural bylaw 18270 and section 2392, subsections B and D of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including city employees and labor relations or employee negotiations. I now ask that the public and any staff who are not required to be in this closed session meeting to please exit the chambers and take all of your personal belongings with you. Members of the public will be invited to return to hear any further deliberations upon committee reconvening in open session indicated by the removal of the frosting on the windows and the elimination of the white noise. The committee will, in the event they are in closed session, for more than 30 minutes, wait up to 5 minutes upon reconvening in open session before proceeding with the meeting, to provide members of the public and the media time to return to the meeting room. May I please have a motion to go in camera? Moved by Clark, seconded by Nan. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, everyone. Oh, no, just regarding the name of the committee. We need to go back to Emergency and Community Services. A lot of confusion about health, public health, so I spoke to Paul about this as well. But I'm just going to provide a notice today about it. Yeah. At the appropriate time, yeah. Just have Paul help us with the wording at the appropriate time. Okay, so may I have a mover and a seconder that staff direction and contents of the report, that the staff direction be that the contents of the report remain confidential. Moved by Paul, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. And before we adjourn, just as a notice, there's been some concern and surrounding confusion regarding public health and Healthy and Safe Communities Committee and the change in the name and how is EMS and fire represented. Councillor Whitehead last term had, I think, correctly informed us that perhaps the wording wasn't really in our best interest. So at the appropriate time, Councillor Whitehead will be bringing forward a motion, and I'll second it accordingly, because he did bring this up. And we're going to get help from Paul Johnson with the wording that we go back to Emergency and Community Services. Is that correct with respect to the committee, but not the department yet, and as a result of other issues, right? So Paul, can you elaborate on that?
So through the chair, I've listened certainly from a committee perspective because there's the Board of Health, which one element of Healthy and Safe Communities reports to through the Medical Officer of Health, and now Healthy and Safe Communities. Some people do get a bit confused as to what goes where. And then, of course, nowhere in there is the emergency services, which is a big part of our department, fire and paramedics. So I'm quite comfortable, our staff are quite comfortable. If this committee is Emergency and Community Services, it clearly delineates what matters would come before this committee for discussion as opposed to the Board of Health. We can't change the Board of Health name. Right. But that would delineate it. In terms of the department, our quick conversations with Councillor Whitehead and yourself, I think there's some other considerations if we want to look at the department. Happy to do that along the way with you. Health would need to be part of that because the department does include health both in long-term care and our public health, of course. But if we want to go early on in this with the committee name, happy to have it happen. For me, it makes life a little easier too.
Then we'll work on the department itself as we move forward. But so at the appropriate time at the next meeting, once you send us the wording, Paul, or the clerk perhaps can do that for us, and then we can go from there. Councillor Whitehead.
No, I certainly support that, but I also want to read my notice of motion that I was trying to write out before so that it's on record. And that staff be directed to investigate the staffing and timeliness of decisions by the Landlord and Tenant Board and report back to the Healthy and Safe Communities Committee.
Wait a minute. I have to declare an interest on that. I have to step away and give the chair back.
Oh, sorry.
And this is really out of
order. I already stated, but I just wanted to
really out of order. So I can't accept that right now. We'll do. Can you just? We work on that at council.
Sorry, it's a notice of motion. That's all.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's a notice of motion.
Wait, just hold on then. Okay. We can't. Okay, so anyway, we got the name issue done. Let's stay focused. Okay, we're going to work on that. Clerk's going to respond back to us with respect to the wording at the next meeting. Now I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Jackson, seconded by Clark to adjourn. All in favor? Carried.